Today's guest is Bari A. Williams. Bari is an attorney and a startup advisor and co-founder of the Randall Lab. She currently serves as an advisor to Vera and fractional GC for Carrier Karma. Her primary practice areas including emerging technology transactions, privacy and data protection, IP licensing, and terms of service. Bari is also a published author with bylines in the New York Times, Wired, Fortune, and a Fast Company. She's the former head of business operations management for North America at StudHub, and where she also managed business planning, operations, and hold P&L, including product innovation and partnerships. Prior to StudHub, she served as lead counsel at Facebook, doing legal work supporting connectivity labs to build drones, lasers, and satellite. During her Facebook tenure, Bari also built the company's supplier diversity program. Bari served as an advisor to startups in the enterprise and the e-commerce space, including Blavity and Afrotech, Bandwagon, Owl, acquired by Callpass, and Telepath. She recently gave congressional testimony on bias in AI in financial services, February 2020. Her book, Diversity in the Workplace, Eye-Opening Interviews to Jumpstart Conversations About Identity, Privilege, and Bias, was released on March 31st, 2020, and she's awaiting her second book to be published, detailing her experience as a Black woman from Oakland, working in the tech in the heart of the Valley. There is so much to talk about, Bari. Very welcome to Bachi Talk Equity Matters podcast.
Thank you.
Well, let's go back to the very beginning. Where were you born? And let's talk about your early life and education.
Oakland.
Okay.
I am a Black woman from Oakland. I was raised in Oakland and I still live in Oakland. I need to get out more. But yeah, I would say what kind of gave me the biggest foundation aside from my home and my family was my high school.
Right.
I had the chance to choose. My mom didn't want me to go to the public school that I would have gone to. And so she said, you have 3 options and which one we'll tour all 3 and you pick the one you want. I picked the all girls school. And she was surprised, and a lot of my friends were surprised, but I picked it because it would give me the ability to focus and not have to worry about, what does a boy think about my answer to this question? Or if I have a question, are they going to think that this is not substantive? Or I didn't want to think about any of that. And so I wanted to focus, which is odd because, most 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds are not thinking about how do I focus more in class and prepare to go to college, except I was always that kid. So that school was foundational, and it gave me more of a voice, and just because it instilled this desire to be of service to other people and to also use your voice in order to effectuate that. So Holy Names High School, where young women exceed expectations. When I say it, I have to say the whole thing, including the motto. Noblesse oblige. Love that school. From there, I went to Berkeley.
Right.
Absolutely loved UC Berkeley. I had in my mind, I wanted to go to the school that I got into that was the highest ranked, and it was Berkeley. So again, that's 6 miles from my house. So still not getting out much. But from there, I moved to LA and lived in LA and worked in advertising for a bit.
Right.
Came back home and went to business school, law school, and just been here ever since. I've been practicing law for a little bit over 14 years, and kind of got into diversity work because I saw a need. And for me, it's really important to, my grandmother used to say, bloom where you're planted. So if I could see a need and I don't see anybody else kind of fixing that problem. And sometimes I think because of my identity and it being intersectional and different, and even where I'm from, sure, I can see things that other people don't think don't see as problems or don't even know that there is a problem.
Mm,
So that's kind of how I got into diversity work. Is it just it's personal,
sure.
and I feel like it's just something that I needed to do.
Mm, that's very powerful. Thank you for sharing, Barry. And was there any childhood memory that shaped you to who you are today, either in university or in college or around when you grow up?
Yeah, I think what kind of got me started is I watched my mom and my
Mm,
grandmother kind of do things that were different, and they started things that and did things that had never been done. They were both teachers,
mm,
but my mother, she and a group of other people started the Oakland oratorical competition, and it's a Black history competition where students recite poetry or write their own poetry, or they will act out passages from plays, and then of course you're judged and you win. And I competed in the first grade, and I won.
mm.
I won for that my grade. And now I thought my mom had rigged that. In hindsight, I was like, did you do this? Like, I'm not on the judging panel. But
Right.
I won. And so that let me know that I shouldn't be fearful of having a voice or being a public speaker,
Mm,
and or just say what's on my mind. And I also like watching her create that
mm.
made me, it was kind of like learning by observation. She never said you can go and do something or make something of your own. It was just I watched her do it and I never thought twice about it.
Nice.
Um, but I think it was that experience, and then the experience of I used to play Jeopardy with my grandfather when I would come over there during the week. And I remember there was a final question about an island off of the coast of Africa. And we were going back and forth, and I was 10. And we
Mhm.
were going back and forth about it. And I was like, the answer is Madagascar.
Mm.
And he was like, no, it's not. It's Cape Verde. And I was like, it's not. It's Madagascar. And the answer was Madagascar.
Yes, yes, yeah.
And I had argued why I thought that was the answer during the commercial break while we waited for the answer. And he just told me, you should be a lawyer.
Mm.
You're too good at like arguing people down. And voila.
Brilliant, brilliant, Barry. Thank you for sharing that. Again, when you were very clear from the beginning, you want to go to which school and you want to go to which university. Talk us through about your educational choices, because bachelor's in mass communications, then you have a Master of Arts in African American Studies, then you had an MBA, then you also had a law degree. Talk us through what was in your mind when you pursued this and why is this important for you?
Yeah. Or my mom just tells me all the time that I'm overeducated. And she's like, what's stopping you now? Why don't you just go get a PhD and an MD? And I'm like, you've got everything else. Um, I think for me, it was just always because my mother and my grandmother and my grandmother's sisters, they were teachers. And so I was raised around nothing but educators.
Mm,
And
mm, mm.
the hardest summers you can ever have as a kid is when your mom also has the summer off. So I didn't get a summer off. It was always some kind of educational enrichment program or camp or something that I was doing. And it's funny, in hindsight, I do that with my own kids. Like they don't get a summer off.
Mm,
So
mm,
we
mm,
tried that last year with my son, and he halfway through was like, I'm bored.
mm,
And it's like, okay, well, you're not going to stay home for a month again. So, but I think that thinking through the educational pieces of it, my mom and my grandmother, well, all of them, they went to HBCUs and they wanted me to consider an historically Black college. And I did. And I thought that that was a great option.
mm,
But for
mm,
me, it was always, I understood my place in the world based off of my identity. And I
mm.
thought that I would have the best opportunity and more doors would open if I went to a college that had a highest ranking I could get into, and that also had a great alumni base. And
Mm,
so all of this was strategic. And
mm.
it even started with my high school choice. Like, what's going to be a good school that's going to be foundational where I can concentrate and not worry about any external factors. or internal factors being boys or popularity or whatever else. Like that community in high school was a sisterhood. But I think that was really paramount to me, that was foundational. And then that set the bar for me to go to Berkeley. And going to Berkeley was a very conscious decision. I chose mass communications because initially I wanted to be a reporter. I knew at some point I wanted to go to law school, but I wanted to be a sports reporter in particular. And and at the end of graduating, I had an offer to be a production assistant at ESPN. And I saw the salary and that I would have to move to Connecticut. Okay. And I was like, oh, hell, I'm not doing this. So, but I knew that I liked advertising. So I went and worked in advertising. The decision to get an MBA was, again, strategic in terms of opening more doors. And also I wanted to go back home after having lived in LA and worked in advertising. And I wanted a foundational base of understanding of how business operated. That was just purely educational for me. I had never, oh, wow, like the financial courses, the accounting courses, that was something I had never, ever contemplated doing. But it was great to understand that because I can read a balance sheet. Like I don't need a CFO to come and talk to me about it. I can read it and understand it myself. Nice. African-American studies, it was something that I applied for and I got a scholarship from UCLA to do it. And so I loved the discipline. I loved what I learned. I minored in African-American studies at Berkeley. And so having the master's in it was just icing on the cake. But I knew I wanted to go to law school. And there was a class that I took while I was getting that master's degree that really sealed it. And it was about race and the law. And now everyone talks about critical race theory like it's some horrible boogeyman, but I guarantee you it is taught on a collegiate and a grad school level. And that is where I had an actual critical race theory curriculum, is that class. And that class sealed the deal for me. I wanted to understand more about it. And went to law school, got into Hastings, came back home, and just thoroughly enjoyed it. And actually property class and con law had a lot of kind of CRT undertones where you understood what was the policy behind why certain laws were made. And that to me was really the basis of why I wanted to go to law schools. I wanted to understand how law could be utilized or weaponized, and how do you combat that? And I chose my practice area because I felt like there is a lack of Black attorneys that are working in my specific space. And typically the majority of Black attorneys tend to go into defense of some sort, whether that's criminal defense or it's employment defense, or they're prosecutors. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do something that would actually help build the community and build the resources and equity within those communities. And the best way to do that is by helping people build their businesses. So that to me was a natural transition of like, I want to be a commercial contracts attorney or privacy attorney, help people build business. And that's going to be beneficial to the communities because with transactional law, there should be two winners. And when you're dealing with litigation, there's always a loser. And that to me was like, I'd rather build people up.
What a thought process there, Bari. I mean, like, it's just 10 minutes in the podcast already. My God, the clarity that
I'm strategic about even what I eat for breakfast, Beskar.
Wow.
Yeah, the water I'm drinking is strategic even because I'm trying to cut back on soda. So hint water, I mean, you have a little bit of flavor, but it's water.
Totally brilliant. What an inspiration, Bari. I mean, like that you have a total clarity on your education, why you are studying it. You're mixed of African American mass communication, advertising. You went to California, and then you're back. And even with your law, you were very specific on exactly what you wanted to talk us through about your how your career evolved over time and what were some of the key milestones.
In terms of how I thought about how to get to this point?
Yeah, I mean, like because
Education.
even though you made it so natural on the education, now you are in the corporate world. You chose a specific way, and then you also
Yeah.
different companies. Talk us through your career, how it evolved after this education, or how you.
Yeah. I knew that eventually the goal for me was to always go in-house, to be in-house counsel at a tech company.
Mm.
And that was always the goal. You get really great training at firms, and I went to a firm, um and that's where I started, and it was really, really great. And they give you good training, but also the work is very different than what it is that you'd be doing when you're in-house. That firm training was more around how to start and support startups, like corporate bylaws and incorporations and financing, and all that's very valuable because you need that stuff before you can get to be in-house counsel, right? Because if those things don't exist, there's no company to support. And I just was trying to think of, how is it that I could get in-house and make more of an impact? And that was more important to me.
Mm.
So I thought that it just being in-house is where I needed to go. And I was lucky enough to get the opportunity to do that with working at RMS, which was, interestingly enough, it's a company that handles financial modeling for insurance.
Wow.
And one of the new products when I first started there in 2009, one of the first products they had, they were having a new product, and it was about pandemics,
Mhm.
and which pandemic modeling, I no lie, and I thought that was hilarious in hindsight now, is that you have pandemic modeling, but I don't think they could have foreseen anything that had to do that we had to deal with in 2020.
Yeah.
So, but from there, just kind of kept going. And I my personal way of thinking of, do I want to work for a company?
Mm.
I think of three things. Is one, do I use this product, or would I use this product?
Mm.
Um, or would I want to support a business that does use this product if it's a B2B service? The second thing is, what's their mission? Does
Mm.
the mission, am I inspired by it? And the third thing is, do they do both? And
Mhm.
if they hit both of those targets, then absolutely, I want to do that. So for me, that's super, super important.
Mm.
Um, and that's just something that I think about, because on those days when you're just worn out and you're tired and you don't want to do it, you're just like, oh, I'm beating my head against the wall and I don't want to do this anymore.
Sure.
The mission is going to keep you going. Or if you use the product, that's going to keep you going because you're working on actively making it better. And so
Mm.
that's kind of how I've approached each of my decisions in terms of where it is that I'm going. And that's been kind of my North Star.
Brilliant. And how long were you there in the in-house legal teams, Bari?
At RMS,
Okay.
I don't remember. I want to say about a year and a half I
Okay.
was there. Um, yeah, about a year and a half. And from there, I actually went to a nonprofit
Mm.
and led their programming. I was their head of programming. And then I went back in-house, and eventually, a couple of years after that, ended up at Facebook. And
Mm.
that was both. It was at the time when I got there, was that 2014? And I used the product. I had signed up for Facebook as soon as it opened because I was in grad school at UCLA. And so the first year that Facebook started, like they were allowing people to register from UCLA. And so I did. You had to have a college email address in order to register, which people probably don't know that now or forgot because it's been around since 2004. But so I had used the product and I liked the mission. And at that point in time, the mission was to connect the world and facilitate conversation. And that I liked. So that it hit both of my check boxes, and I was very happy to get the offer and go there.
Nice. So from RMS to Facebook, and from Facebook to startup, and from there to a startup advisor. Talk us through your journey until today.
Yeah. I think that a lot of people don't realize that they need, I would say that the advisor piece of it
Mm,
is a lot. I've met a lot of people through working in tech and working particularly at Facebook. You get exposed to other people that either have startups that they're looking to be acquired, or they're looking for their startup to do business with Facebook. And so I met a lot of people that way, and also got to meet some VCs, and they would tell me about the companies that they were investing in. And with that, it was an opportunity to kind of, I don't want to say school people, but in a way, like people don't realize that they need legal until they need legal. And
correct.
that's the problem. If you would have had legal beforehand, you wouldn't have needed legal. So they come to you when it's too late.
Mm,
Whether that's some kind of a regulatory issue, or it's an employment issue, or you're being sued, or there's an IP issue, something along those lines. And so I looked at taking advisory roles in certain companies because to me, it's beneficial if you have legal up front, then you won't have to need it on the back end, meaning when those things happen, those negative things happen.
mm,
So that was kind of my initial goal with that. And the first company that I started advising was Blavity,
mm,
and it was great. And I ended up doing that just due to taping a segment when Blavity was first starting. They were doing a segments on different workers of people who were Black in tech,
mm.
and I was filming it on the founder's couch. And it was a YouTube video, and I was 8 months pregnant with my daughter, which is crazy because she will be 8 in May.
Mm,
And so that was 8 years ago, sitting on that couch. And then after that, I just started advising them and helping them do some of their initial contracts for content. And um, but that was great because that set them up for what it is that they needed, and they got huge. Like Blavity has investment has been invested, but Google Ventures invested in Blavity. So they're doing great. And Afrotech is huge, and everyone loves Afrotech. All of the big companies are supporting Afrotech as sponsors, and it's nice to have just been there in the beginning and played a little part to help that. And again, that goes back to what my mission was to help facilitate business in those communities and to drive equity and value in those communities. And Afrotech is just like what Morgan did. She took and ran with it, and that has been such a huge investment in our community through other startups and helping other startups, and also with employees that are working at some of these bigger companies. Like what she's done with it is just phenomenal. And like I look at her and she's a role model for me, and she's younger than I am.
mm,
But that to me has always kind of been my advising philosophy too, is like, who needs to figure out when they need legal and how they need legal.
mm,
And so that's kind of how I've decided what it is I would work on. Owl was much the same way. The Owl team, someone referred me to them, and we got to talking and met in person, and I advised them around some IP things and early contracts. And eventually a couple of years later, they got acquired.
mm.
So it's been a very interesting play. And right now I'm advising a company, an AI company called Vera, which is trying to help companies make ethical decisions using AI. So that for me is, of course, hits my boxes because that's tech for good, and that's what I care about.
Nice. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. And also co-founding the Runda Lab. Talk us through about what Runda Lab does.
So Render Lab is more fun. It's essentially using Web3 as a means to help build brands, meaning that the community is what Web3 is actually actively building and what they care about. And Runda Lab is supporting communities in order to help build brands or take brands to the next level based on their own interests.
Mm,
So think about what we're starting with is the idea of tequila. So if you have a premium tequila and you're a tequila connoisseur, there are only going to be certain limited editions of things. And if you are a member, well, you'll have access to this, and you'll have an NFT in order to cash that in, and you will have access to it. You don't have to buy it, but you just have the access, and you can talk and deal with the brands independently and individually. And so that to me is very interesting concept when we came up with it, because that transfers to a lot of different industries, whether that's art, and art could be painting, could be sculptures, could be written works, could be tons of different things. And what it actually is supposed to do is have the consumers influence where the brand goes, as opposed to the brand just presenting something to you. Like, think of it as if we're talking about tequila, the Casamigos. Well, if you are one of the members of that community, you tell them, well, we did this tasting and we prefer this, and this is what you should actually be selling people. So it takes the community's expertise and values it, as opposed to you just get whatever hits on the market. So it's an access, there's access, and there's actually the opportunity to influence what happens. And that has many different use cases, which is something that we want to use, not just for, fun things. That's something else for me, is like, I never want to build something that I don't think has any actual utility. I don't like I love the idea of convenience apps. I love it. I'm an Instacart fanatic, and I love DoorDash, and so do my kids. They absolutely are addicted to DoorDash. But if, that's not something that can actively happen. So if there's a recession or something happens, people are not going to continue to use those things because they don't have to. Like, if there's something that happens and there's an economic fallout, I'm going back to pushing my own cart in the grocery store. Like, that's a no-brainer.
Sure.
But that's why I want something that is something that's personal, something that people find utility in and value in, that is not something that's out of convenience or is just for fun. And so that's why, for me, it's important to develop multiple use cases for Runda Lab.
Yes. Right. It's amazing how you take complex subjects like technology and law and bring it together. I mean, like, they both are.
I try. I mean, I think that that's important. I think that what you really want to do is figure out, how do you combine tech and law? And there's so many overlaps, particularly now when you think about even something just as like Chat GPT. Yes. And how that, and then there are other things that there's tech component to it, there's a law component to it, there's a diversity component to it. The use of AI, according to a McKinsey study, that's going to displace about 5 to 6 million Black workers in the US by 2030. Wow. And that could be accelerated because you have something like Chat GPT. And now that they're doing these brand deals with OpenTable and Expedia, and you don't need customer service. And that's a whole different ballgame and problem, is where you find women and people of color in certain capacities in these companies.
100%.
They're in capacities which can be easily automated or completely done away with. And so that becomes not just an issue around tech or law or diversity, that now becomes a policy issue too, because you can't just have 6 million people unemployed by 2030. And that's just one diverse group. That's not counting for, I think, Latinos. That group was around, when I read that, I think it was 9 million. You can't have 15 million people out of work. That's a policy problem now. Now that's a government issue. So all of these things kind of are in a perfect storm.
Brilliant. Yes, I think that nicely brings us to the congressional testimony on bias in AI. I mean, like, was there anything particular about that that you would like to share, Bari?
I think the most important thing from that came out of that was there were congressmen who kept hammering home, what is the definition of fairness? And there was one in particular who asked me, I'm trying to remember. I know he was a Republican congressman from Indiana.
Right.
And he specifically asked me, was I looking for fairness in the input, meaning the data sets that are used, or fairness in the output? And I said, well, I don't think that they're mutually exclusive.
Mm.
And I think one begets the other.
Yes.
So I reject the premise of your question just on its face.
Mm.
So that to me is how I look at that. Is I don't think it has to be an either or. I think it's a both and, because if you're using the appropriate data sets, you will get a more just conclusion.
Yes.
And then he asked, is the problem the data sets or the people picking the data sets?
Mm.
And my answer to that was, it's both, because who is fact checking the fact checkers?
Mm. 100%, totally. Very, very powerful.
I don't think I made a fan out of it.
No, I mean, like, these are important questions that might be questions today, Bari, as you rightly said, but our kids are going to grow up in this era. So, because if
Yeah.
they're going to rely on these tools to learn their history, to learn everything about themselves or
They're
around
already using Chat GPT to write term papers, which now is like killing college professors and people in grad school professors, because is this your work, or did you just cut and paste this from Chat GPT?
That's correct. Yes.
So, and that's, I mean, also what scares me about the idea of that is that, to a certain extent, some people will use that as a great thing and like a shortcut to learning more on their own. Other people will use that as a shortcut, period, and will not go further, will not research, will not do the work.
Yeah.
They're just going to use this to get whatever it is they need done, and then that's it. And that's what I worry about, is I don't want to effectuate or assist people in being lazy, particularly with learning and understanding something.
Yes, very profound. Thank you for sharing. And talk us about the books, the two books. The first book that was published a couple of years ago, just before COVID, Diversity in the Workplace, Eye-Opening Interviews.
Oh, it was published during COVID. It was so sad. I was supposed to do a whole book tour and had certain things already set up, and then the world shut down, and everyone was hopeful, right? Like, oh, this will only last like a couple weeks, and like fast forward 2 years later.
Yeah. Exactly.
When our family finally got COVID, it was like we avoided it when everything was closed and when people were getting it, and then everything opened back up, and my son went on a school field trip, and they said, come pick him up 3 hours away on a field trip, on an overnight field trip, and he had COVID.
Wow.
And it was the gift that kept on giving.
And yeah, totally. I assume family is healthy now, and they all are.
Oh yeah, that was almost a year ago, so everyone's good, but it was not fun. It's not fun to have a house. 3 out of 4 people had COVID, so
we had more than 3 times, Bari, and yeah, I mean, like it
more than 3 times.
Yeah, we had it, and now it looks like it's picking up again here in the UK.
Oh yeah, I saw that. And I was curious. I think it's because people kind of thought it was over and got lax.
I think we have to live with it. I think that's a separate topic.
I think it's but I think that's what it is now, right? Like it's moved from pandemic to endemic. Like it's a thing that's just going to keep occurring, and you just have to figure out how to work around it. But I also think that the more we're exposed to it, the better for people, and people that can handle it, because I want to be very cognizant of people that are immunocompromised. But it will weaken. It will never not feel worse than the flu, but it will probably kind of weaken a bit.
100%. I mean, like that said, it's I think it is going to be like that, I think. So so let's get back to the books. So the very first book, and also talk us about the second book. What was the story behind it and why diversity in the workplace, and now why Bari is sharing her story of her own growing up in Oakland in the tech.
Well, the first book it's segmented in five different chapters that cover, so it's 25 stories of different people, and they don't all work in tech. Some work in journalism, some are, engineers, some are self-employed. There are two Black women that work in the wine and spirits industry, that have their own companies. And it's just to talk about what are their experiences in dealing with their workplaces and how they're treated and how they've navigated it and how that has influenced how they do business. And I thought it was important because everyone has a story. I don't think that, and I think when people think of diversity, they tend to just look at it from a standpoint of race and gender, and that isn't it. Diversity has many other components. You have age, you have religion, you have national origin and language, and there are lots of different components that people just simply don't seem to think about. And I think that they should, but it seems as if they don't. And so I decided that it made more sense to segment it that way. And actually the publisher approached me because they'd read several of the op-eds that I'd written, one for New York Times, I'd written two, a couple for Fast Company, and they thought that they wanted me to write this. And I thought, well, wow, that's pretty cool. I'd contemplated writing a book and really wanted to, but I wasn't there yet. And so this was kind of the impetus and the push that I needed. And it was awesome. And just being able to interview 25 people and hear those stories was so moving. And so the way that it's segmented is it's race, gender, so it's women, LGBTQ plus, ability and age, and then religion and culture. Each of those two are grouped into one chapter each. And so that's something else that I feel like people do not consider is religion and culture and ability and age. Those four segments, people tend to kind of gloss over and don't really deep dive. And so they tend to be ignored. And then when you think about it from an intersectional perspective, like you combine several of those things, right? Like say you are a young Latina who is LGBTQ, and there is that's one of the interviews that I had. And because she looks Caucasian, she talked about how people often would say things in front of her and not realize that she was actually Mexican. And it's fascinating. There's something like that in my own family. Well, my husband's cousins, they're biracial, but they do not look as if they are half Black. And so people say things in front of them all the time, and then they have to say, wait, stop. What'd you just say? Or in the case of one of my favorite people on earth is his cousin, and he did something for me that he did at his workplace, and I asked him if he was sure that he wanted to do it, and he did. And it was something that he did for another Black man. And someone asked him, like, why are you so invested in this? And he was like, Black. And he'd worked there for like 20 years. They never noticed or never thought to ask, because he is seemingly white passing. But if you ask him, he'll let you know. And so he put himself out there and on the line, and I will say what I asked him to do worked. So, and it was shocking for some of his coworkers, but it also was kind of liberating for him.
Mm, wow. Did you find any commonality in the 25 stories, Bari?
I think the commonality is that everybody had a story.
Mm,
Like everybody had something that was going on
yes.
where they felt like they were judged, or that something about their identity
Mm,
was a hindrance for them at work. There was a one story that was absolutely fascinating, and it was in the age and ability section, and it was a neurodivergent bisexual sommelier.
wow.
Now, say that 3 times fast. But
Neurodivergent.
the problem of where his ability issue came in wasn't just the neurodivergence. He was an active alcoholic, but
Wow.
he was a sommelier. So imagine that your job is actually exacerbating your disease. And that was fascinating. And he eventually got sober and he quit that job. He's like, I can't do this anymore. Like
Mm,
he woke up one day and was like, that's it. And he quit and he entered a coding boot camp. And now he works as a data engineer.
interesting.
And one thing that he took with him that he tried to put into his next workplace, because tech companies are infamous for, there's a very alcohol based culture. And
Mm,
I can say that when I every tech company I've worked for, there's alcohol around, like openly on tables or in the refrigerator at work, like it's there. So some people are pulling out the coffee and somebody could be pulling out bourbon. You, who knows? I don't know what's in your cup, but I know that it's there.
mm,
And one thing that he did is that Doug said he made a point when he went to his new workplace as a data engineer, that there were activities, that team building activities that were not centered on alcohol. So instead of like going to happy hour, why don't we do a hike? Or why don't we, go bowling instead of going wine tasting? And I hadn't thought about it from that perspective, but it makes complete sense because there's so much, and I don't think it's just in tech, but I think just generally, our culture kind of centers socializing around alcohol, whether that's happy hour or it's you tell somebody you want to meet up with them and like, oh yeah, let's go grab drinks. Well, he doesn't drink, so you need to meet up with him in a different way. So that's the other thing that I learned, is that a lot of it, that there was one commonality of meet people where they are.
mm. Wow, it's very powerful. Thank you, Bari. And now you're sharing your story from growing up in Oakland and what you faced in the tech industry. Talk us through. I know the book is going to come. Don't share everything. I'm not just share nuggets so that we all can buy the book and get to know you at every level, Bari. Thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting. It just kind of details my own experience of being a diverse person in the workplace.
Mm,
And I think what was interesting about that is I was inspired by listening to the 25 stories of the people that I interviewed, and to kind of sit with my own. And a lot of things, when I was going through the process of interviewing them, it made me think a lot about the things that I had experienced and seen. And for me, the natural step was to kind of sit and just start journaling. And from there, it turned into a book, and kind of going around and doing the publishing dating dance, and found one that got what I actually was going for and how I wanted it to be portrayed, and signed with them. And now I'm done. I'll turn in the manuscript on Friday, so we'll see. But it talks about things from, I've had a manager who asked me like why my hair does this, or how does my hair do this, and I'm like, it's curly. Like you
mm,
could see it, it's curly.
mhm,
And but the question is, how does it do it? Like,
mm.
it grows out of my head that way, and I wash my hair and condition it like you do. To actually having an instance where a woman put her hands in my hair without asking, without invitation, without provocation. She just full on just like, oh, look at that. Like, oh my God, you just pet me. This is not a petting zoo. To having, you know, a superior ask me if I got into Berkeley on affirmative action. Yeah. And asking if my husband had gotten into Harvard on a basketball scholarship. So I'm 5'10" and my husband is 6'6", and he's an engineer. But that didn't matter to this man. He saw a Black guy who's tall and went to a good school. So you must have gotten in on a scholarship. There's no way you could have just, like, how are you from Oakland and you went to Harvard? Like, how does that happen? Yeah. And then when I said that, no, I didn't, I got in, and like affirmative action actually had been banned in California before I graduated from high school. So no, I didn't get in that way. It didn't exist. And he said, well, did you get in on a athletic scholarship? Like, did you play a sport in high school? And I was like, yeah, I played tennis, but I was like not even the first ranked person on my team. So no, I didn't play collegiate tennis. So I didn't get a scholarship for that. Like, also, why are you just like, you're going to keep going down this line of conversation? Read a room. But yeah, it got to a point where he kept asking questions that the coworker that we were sitting with was so uncomfortable, he got up and left.
Wow.
And I found that coworker later, and he had made up this excuse if he had a meeting. And I said, you didn't really have a meeting, did you? And he said, no, I didn't, but I didn't want to sit there and watch that. Yes. Now, I would have preferred if he would have said something and said, hey, why are you asking this? Or like, that's not really cool. But I understand everybody isn't like me and isn't going to necessarily speak up when they see something, say something.
Yes.
So his answer was just like, I don't want to even see it. So, but it talks about that. It talks about how being from Oakland, how tech has completely changed the region, and how tech has completely even just changed Oakland. Like little, like places I used to go to don't exist anymore. There are bars with bocce ball courts in them now, where there used to be like soul food restaurants. So it's just a very completely different vibe, and it almost feels like being an outsider in my own home.
Thank you, Bari. I think I wish you all the success with the book launch, and I'm sure it's going to be amazing, and we'll buy it, we'll share it here in this part of the world. And yeah, please. And it takes a lot of courage to share the journey, and also to share that even though there are, I think, a day in and day out, we see all the posts about equality, diversity, inclusion, and this still persists. And it's important for us to ensure that we say that message loud and clear. Nice. Thank you, Bari. Thank you for sharing. So 5-6 questions around DI. We pick your brains, being a strong advocate on this. Then we'll move into some fun part, and we'll finally wrap this up, Bari. Is that okay?
Sure.
So, Bari, how do you inspire others to stand up for themselves and to support each other?
That's a good question. I will say I have a lot of truisms. I don't call them quotes. I call them truisms that my mother and my grandmother raised me with, and that I have now started to impart to my kids. My son is almost 13 and my daughter is almost 8. And I think they're at very impressionable ages, particularly my son, where he needs to learn, like, I'm not always going to hold your hand, and you need to learn how to advocate for yourself.
Yes.
But one thing that my grandmother used to always say is, expect what you accept. So if you allow people to treat you poorly, you can't expect them to do anything different than what you've already been showing that you will take.
Wow.
So that, like, that's it. Like that is what I tell other people, is expect what you accept.
Nice.
Like, it's 4 words, very simple, but it's true. If someone has been treating you badly and you continuously accept that, and you don't correct them or you don't stand up for yourself, they have no incentive to do anything different, because they're used to you accepting that poor treatment.
Correct. For a powerful message. Thank you, Bari. So, Bari, and then now you are in the situation. So how do you adapt and thrive in different situations without compromising your authenticity?
I think I've just gotten to a point in my career where that's actually funny. That's something I talk about in my book too, is that um Black women get judged more harshly for almost everything, whether that's our attitude, the appearance, our tone of voice, all of that. And I went through my interview process at Facebook with straight hair. So every time I showed up for an interview, I had straight hair. And when I showed up on my first day of work, I looked like this. It's like, surprise. You thought you were getting one thing and you're getting this. But for me, I feel like I've gotten to a point in my career where my work should be enough to stand alone. And I'm not going to compromise who I am or what I value in order to make somebody else comfortable. Like that just isn't something I like. I'm always professional and always cordial and always polite, but I'm not going to do things that compromise my personal integrity. I'm just not doing that. If you would have asked me that maybe when I was 27, maybe I would have said, depends. What's the role? But I'm not doing that now. And so for me, it's more important to be, and that's actually my high school yearbook quote, to thine own self be true. And that's it. Like, I'm not doing something different for somebody else's comfortability at the expense of my own.
Very, very powerful. Thank you, Bari. And what do you think are the common myths about the misconceptions that we face? Equity is there, diversity is given, all these things. What are some of the common myths that you have heard or you have seen?
I would say, and I actually counseled someone through this, but people thinking that you can just leave your identity at the door at a workplace, or that you have the ability to, my husband always uses the phrase, put it down. You have the ability to put the outside world down, and you can't. And I think what a lot of companies learned, particularly American companies learned in the summer of 2020, you can't do that. Like, your Black employees needed all the mental health days they could get during that summer, because you're not just dealing with a pandemic. And if you had kids, you were also having to deal with homeschooling, or summer camps were not open. So your kids were home all day, you were expected to work, and you're watching protests from a man being killed on camera by the police. Like, the idea of people having the misconception is that you can just leave all that at the door and you're not preoccupied or thinking about it. And I don't think that that's not accurate. It's just not something that people can do. I cannot leave my Blackness, I cannot leave my womanness at the door. So, and also, if you want me to leave that at the door, then that also means that you don't actually want my real perspective on things when we're trying to problem solve. And that's the bigger issue.
100%. Wow, that's solid. Thank you, Bari. And now, advice to leaders: how do you think they should create a fair and supportive work environment?
I think you need to look at people as whole people. They're not just cogs in a wheel, and they're not just your employees. If you want, and especially if you want increased productivity, which every employer is going to want, you want to make sure that your employees are whole. And part of them being whole is accepting them holistically and for who they are, and meet people where they are. That's exactly what I learned from interviewing those 25 people, is they wanted people to see them for who they were as a whole person and not just as an employee. And I think that the other piece to that is that, when you do that, you're empowering people to give you new ideas, to tell you where they see pitfalls in products that you're creating or anything else. And I think that is, when you don't do that, you're losing perspective that could be key and that's beneficial for growth within your company. I think that's hugely important. And that's one of the reasons why I created the supplier diversity program at Facebook. Is we weren't moving the needle as quickly as the company wanted to in terms of employees, but well, hey, let's supplement that with something else that's equally as important and also supports diversity. So that was important to me.
Brilliant, brilliant. And as you can see now in social media and other things, you do have a lot of companies who talk. They
Yeah,
do,
they talk. They talk.
but they don't do. I mean, like, what can we do about them? I mean, like, as the employee, because we do get it time and time again from employees of these companies or from people who are part of a set forum or an association or something. Tell them, hey, this is just lip talk.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of things that go on that are performative.
Yes.
Mainly what I would say is, if you look at during, oh my God, Bhaskar, I could go on and on about this all day. I have so many pet peeves about some of this stuff, but particularly the performative things that I hate the most.
Yes.
If you look in the month of June,
Right.
every company changes their Twitter, like their Twitter profile pic to a rainbow flag.
Mm.
And my question around that is, but what are you doing internally to promote your LGBTQ plus employees? Where do they sit within leadership?
Mm.
How many of them do you actually have?
Yeah.
And are you doing something internally? Are you paying them equitably?
Mm.
Like those are the things I care about. Don't change your profile picture. I don't care about that. Like you could not change the profile picture, but just make sure that you're actually paying that community.
Mm.
You're paying them equitably. You are looking at them for the same rates of promotion as everybody else, as cisgender white males. Like, if you're not doing that, this is all fake to me.
Yes.
And I say the same thing because now that Juneteenth is a federal holiday in the US, now you're doing it with Black people. And I do not want the pride monthification of Juneteenth. So if you're going to take that, so you change your rainbow flag pick to a red, black, and green flag for one day for Juneteenth.
Mm-hmm.
But are you doing those things internally for actual like Black employees? Actually, how many Black employees do you have?
Right.
And the ones that you have, are they all like in one certain demographic of your company?
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, are they all in HR? Or are they all in marketing? Are they all in diversity?
Mm-hmm.
And then double click down that on a level further. How high are they? Are they directors? Are they VPs? Do you have anybody in the C-suite on your board? Are you paying them equitably? People don't think about diversity holistically the way that I think that they should. And I think if companies really want to get it right, it needs to be embedded in the 4 pillars of a company. It needs to be your employees, needs to be your customers, needs to be your suppliers, vendors, and needs to be your board members. And people forget about suppliers and board members the most. And that is where you need them.
Wow, that's a punchy message, Bari. Thank you. And they all need it. So, Barry, I think there are people who do this. How do you think they should celebrate and appreciate and share the diversity in their team so that the message is loud and clear? Sometimes the goodness gets hidden and it's all the fakeness that goes on the top.
Yeah, I think the way you do that, I would say first off, you want people to celebrate internally, because if people are not applauding this work internally, there's a reason for that. And I don't think that you can actively applaud something externally if it's not getting its due recognition internally. I think that's first and paramount. Also, how involved are the actual leaders within the company with those works, or the people doing that work? I think that's something that also goes unnoticed a good deal. Because there are a lot of people that are doing the work, and I call it on the ground. So again, people always presume that I'm a diversity practitioner. Now, I do have a diversity consulting business that I've done trainings and helped other companies build supplier diversity companies or supplier diversity programs. And so, yes, but I'm a lawyer first and foremost.
Yeah.
And I think that people tend to give a ton of credit to whomever the chief diversity officer is or the head of diversity. But you also need to look at the people that are doing the work on the ground that are supporting that person's work, whether those are ERG leaders or those are people who are coming up with, programming or other things, or referring candidates. They're doing that work in support of that person. And I think that companies, it will behoove them in order to show support for those folks as well.
Nice. Thank you,
And
Bari.
then you will make people that will evangelize the company. If people do things because, well, at least for me, I did it because it was a passion project and because I cared. But when people recognized it internally, that made me want to keep doing it more, because it's like, oh, you actually value this. That's great.
That's brilliant. Again, you're right. I think it started with a very, very important point. If it's not celebrated internally, then that means it's not even a start. So beautiful. And then all the way with the other points. Bari, thank you. I think it's been a very, very serious talk. So let's loosen up
And
a
I'm
little bit.
actually somebody who is really not this serious in real life, I promise.
I know, I'm sorry about that.
Only
But
at work.
early at work. Yes, let's spend the next 10, 15 minutes just to get to know a little bit more about your hobbies, interests, and have some fun questions. So what does Bari does when she's not changing the world?
Ooh. Um, I really love to watch sports. My dad, he was a sports agent for a number of years, and so I grew up around sports, like watching it. I love football, basketball, like it's March Madness here, and so I only get invested when it gets to the Sweet 16. And so now I actually care, because now we're down to the Final Four. So you care about that, so I care about it. Football, basketball, tennis. I love watching tennis. I even had a superstition around Rafael Nadal.
Oh,
And every time he won a major, like something good happened, and it did. Like he won Wimbledon the year I took the bar, and I was like, that's it, I'm gonna pass the bar. And I did. My son was born on the day that he played Federer for Wimbledon, and he won Wimbledon.
oh,
So he's like my little good luck charm.
oh.
But yeah, I love watching sports. I've started doing I'm super into candles, so that's something me and my daughter are trying to do together, is to learn how to make candles.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I try to find things that I can get involved in, and also find a way where it's something me and my kids can do together. Me and my husband watch sports together, so that's our thing. But my son and we will, I help him with the science projects, which I think is fun. Um, and he also will watch really bad reality TV shows with me. That's my other vice, is super horrible reality TV shows. I was writing this weekend, and I was binge watching the latest edition of Love is Blind, which was just awful.
But at least you're giving the time with your son. That's amazing. So thank you,
Yeah.
Bari. Yeah. Bari, I think let's go to some fun questions. Bari, I think there's no right or wrong answer. Whatever comes to your mind is the answer. What first answer as well. Yeah. So
Oh, like word association.
no, this is just a random question. I mean, like this is stupid questions, but
I love it.
let me ask and let's go from there. So, first question: what's a
Mm.
movie that's meant for kids, but it scares you every time you watch?
It scares me.
Uh-huh.
Ooh, that's a good question. I think what scares me, it's not scary like you're gonna scream in horror,
Mm,
but the movie Inside Out, I think it's
right.
a Pixar movie. I love that movie. It's for kids, but adults get it. And I think what is scary about it is like you're having to actually deal with and face your emotions. So having them animate different emotions as different people
Mm,
in your head, I loved that. And it was scary, because you have to think about it, at least for me, from the perspective of a parent, of like, yeah, these are things that your kids are going through. And it's like, oh my God, how do I relate to that? And how do I reach him where he is, particularly for my son, because he's almost 13. So like, how do I reach him where he is when he's feeling all of these different things, and all these little voices in his head are like those little characters.
yes.
So
That's
that's scary. And it also was scary for me, because I'm like, oh yeah, I understand joy, and I also understand the sadness, and I also understand the rage. Like,
mm,
ugh.
that's true. You are given a giraffe or an elephant as a mode of transportation. That's
Ooh.
it. Which one would you choose and why?
Ooh, I would say a giraffe.
Hmm.
I think because I'm tall, so I'm used to seeing things from a certain vantage point, literally. And I like the idea of that. And also, giraffes can just run faster.
Right.
Elephants, they can run. They're a little slower and they can kind of bulldoze and stampede through something if they need to. But I would
Hmm.
choose a giraffe because they can run fast and the vantage point of which they see things. So they could see danger before an elephant could because of their ability to see because of their neck.
Under the strategic viewpoint from Bari. So
Yes.
that's a good one. And if you had 5,000 unread emails in your inbox,
Oh my God.
but you only have enough time to respond to 50, what criteria would you use to select them?
Have you been looking at my email, Bhaskar?
I have the same number as well, but
I'm rounding the bases to almost 4,000. And what I'm about to do is just really probably after this call, I'm going to go in and just press like mark all as read. 'Cause it's scary.
yes.
Um, and some of them I don't need. I would say the ones that I would look for to answer first
Mm, mm,
are things that would be personal, meaning they came from either a close friend or a family member. Second would be anything work related.
mm.
And third would be anything that moves me personally, whether that's like a personal interest, um, or something that, or a really good Amazon deal. I'm not gonna lie.
That's nice. So that's good. At least you have a plan of attack, which is good.
Yeah,
So
I will always lead with my close friends and family.
oh,
And I will, yeah. And then work is a close second.
that's good. That's good. That's brilliant. That's a good tip. So if you're only allowed to eat three foods, that's three types of foods for the rest of your life,
Oh
but you
God.
can choose them. Which one would you pick?
Mm, anything with cheese.
Jeez.
I
Right.
love cheese. Cheese, chicken, because you can make chicken a bajillion different ways.
Right.
Like you can fry it, you can bake it, you
Uh-huh.
can drench it in some kind of a sauce. Um, I can use spices and sauce, right?
Yeah, totally. Okay.
Okay, it just these three things.
Yeah.
Ooh, and this may be odd, but I the third would probably either be Brussels sprouts or spinach.
Oh, your vegetables kicks in now.
My dad's a vegetarian.
Oh,
And my
really?
mom said she didn't yeah, my dad is Muslim and my mom is Christian. That's probably a whole different podcast.
Wow.
But um he was vegetarian, and so there are certain things that he didn't eat, both due to his dietary restrictions and just for religious purposes. So my mom said she didn't learn how to actually cook and season food as well
Mhm.
until they started dating, because she had to learn how to, she couldn't lean on putting meat in something in order to season it.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, but I do love spinach, and I do love Brussels sprouts, like some roasted Brussels sprouts or even sauteed spinach with garlic.
Mm,
Love.
nice. Um, uh, please do pass our wishes to your father for Ramadan. It's Ramadan month. So it's the one. So aliens are visiting the earth and they come to you and say, Bari, we are taking you with us. Would you like to join us? Would you go with them, Bari?
I don't know. I mean, I'm still an attorney at heart, so I'm kind of risk averse. I need to know what's going on their planet. Like, first I probably need to know what's going on the ship that you're taking me on. Like what's going on there?
True.
Um, I don't know. I honestly I don't know. I would be really curious,
Hmm.
but I probably would want to, like, I would probably, again, I can't take my attorney hat off ever. I would probably ask them too many questions to understand or discern if I should go first.
Correct. That's good. That's good. At least you're willing to explore, which is the
I
main.
would, yeah, I'd be willing. I
Yeah.
just need to know some things before I sign up.
Yes, that's good. And again, this always, I always reflect on this frequently, but I just ask you, why do you think Most people don't earn more than $100,000 a year.
Why most people don't what?
Why most people don't earn more than
Oh, well, they don't earn. Hmm. I will say what I think that the answer that people give them is because they don't have the skill set that necessitates or earns that amount of money.
Mm, mm,
And I also think that a large reason of that is people just devalue certain types of work. Not that that's not worthy, but people devalue that. And the
mm,
problem is the people that are choosing to hire or not hire get to set the market rate. And that's the problem.
That's a very,
I
very
don't think that like artists, you ask an artist or a muralist or something like a sculptor, how much money are they making? They do it for the love of what they're doing, and they're not going to make a ton of money doing it.
mm.
Same as you ask an executive assistant or an admin, and
Mm.
they're probably not clearing $100,000 on average. I mean, some might be depending on the company or where they're based, but on average they probably aren't. But my thing is, ask the CEO how they would survive without that person.
Wow, that's a very, very good way of looking.
That should tell you right there how much they're worth, because if you wouldn't be able to live for a week, like if that person is gone and let's say you can't replace them for a week, how suboptimal would your life be?
Mm.
And if it's that suboptimal, then that means that they should be earning $100,000, if not more than that.
Total. That's a solid way of looking. You have a choice. You have been given a choice to swap bodies with someone for a day. Who would you choose to swap, and why?
What I swap with? Um, but you would have all their like all of their capabilities and
Yeah.
okay, I just want to ask. Um, I would probably swap with, I don't know, it's a hard choice. I would either swap with my husband
Hmm.
or Barack Obama. And the reason being is because I always had this I've been asked before about, because my identity is intersectional, right? I'm a woman and I'm Black.
Mm.
And I never thought about which identity I put first until the 2007 Democratic primary, when it was like, oh, don't you want Hillary because she's a woman? Like, oh, don't you want Obama because he's Black? And I was like, no,
Mm.
you know what? I actually put my Blackness before my womanness,
Mm.
because I feel like my experience would not really change that much if I were a man but still Black. I would want to test that theory out.
So
But
you
also I think my husband, he's an engineer, so he thinks very differently than I do. And the
okay.
skill set's different. So it would be interesting to see like what living as him for a day would be like.
Wow, that's
And Obama doing it would just be because he's Obama and that's cool. And like, how do you deal with, I'm not famous. How do you deal with being a icon, like a worldwide icon, a history maker? And
Mhm.
but you're also like still just trying to be a husband and a dad.
Yeah,
So I would pick between one of those two. Or if I could split the day up, I'd do 12 hours as one and 12 hours as another.
that's amazing. I mean, I wish, yeah, that's a very interesting way of looking into things. Beautiful choices, those things. So, what's in Bari's bucket list? What are the three things, top three things?
Mm. You know, I think I'm super scared of heights, and I feel like I kind of conquered a little bit of that by ziplining. And
Mhm.
I never thought I would do that, and I did. But I did it so long ago that I'm due for a refresher.
Mhm.
Um, and later that year when we did the zip line, we were supposed to go skydiving with a friend, and I found out 2 weeks before that I was pregnant with my son, so couldn't skydive. So I might want to try skydiving, even if it's the indoor skydiving. Skydiving, I want to eat my way through Italy and Greece.
Mm.
That would be number two. Um, and part of that is I would like to go to the city in Italy that is actually named Bari.
Oh,
Yeah, it's a fishing village, so I would love to actually go there. And I think I just want to my bucket list, I think I just want to, make sure that I'm raising good humans.
Mm.
Like that to me is more important than anything, is to make sure that the two of them they're whole and they're happy and they know how to take care of themselves. They're self-sufficient, they're independent, and that they're nice and they're kind.
I think it comes from you, Bari. I don't, you don't need
It
to.
comes from my mom. It comes from my mom and my grandmother. I would I push them on the academics, but
Mm.
yeah, I would say that I try, but I think that if they're paying attention, then they will understand that there are ways that they could make impact, and they could do it quietly.
Totally. I think that's beautiful. I think you already talked about your mom and grandmother, your husband, your children. But in any case, let me ask you, who are the people who have been the most influential in your life and career, and why?
Hmm. I think outside of them,
Yeah, you could tell them and
yeah,
why.
outside of them, I would say my high school counselor who told me I should not bother to apply to Berkeley because affirmative action was over. I
Mm,
was dead set on proving that lady wrong, and I did.
does.
Um, yeah, when people tell me I can't do something, that puts like a battery in my back and just makes me want to do it more. Um, Other element to that, I would say, uh, my my grandfather was also really good about um just straight shooter,
Mm,
and that impacted a lot of the ways that I communicate, and also um how to just be honest with myself about things.
that's nice. So, what's the best piece of advice you have received from these people or anybody else? And what's the same thing that you would like to share to the listeners?
I think honestly, it would just be what my grandmother said about expect what you accept. That applies in personal relationships, in the workplace, when it comes to like governmental rights, like all of that. That is so simple, but it touches every piece of your life. And that to me has kind of been the most imperative,
Mm.
um for me. That's kind of that is my North Star, is that the idea of that.
Oh, that's going to be the title of this podcast, Bari.
Expect what you accept.
Yeah, totally.
Well,
What?
that I took that and I transformed it into my own thing, which is don't hustle backwards. Because it's like,
Mhm.
if I will not accept bad treatment, and if I do, then I'm hustling backwards, and I will not do that. So don't hustle backwards. I even had it put on a water bottle just so I don't forget for myself.
Yes. What a message. So, as we end the episode now, what's something that Bari is looking forward to in the immediate future? What's exciting that's happening?
Oh, this is personal and not at all related to diversity or work, but I'm super looking forward to um two things, especially for this coming summer. We're going to a family wedding in Jamaica,
Ooh,
towards the end of May. So looking forward to that. And then my son turns 13 on 4th of July, and I'm looking forward to
so-
celebrating him and letting him have a party with his friends, and celebrating that he'll be 13 and yet I'm still 30. So I look forward to that, because COVID ruined their ability to have birthday parties, and I think that's, you know, COVID
Mm.
did a number on everybody, but for kids, they lost like 2 years. And so this is a great year for him to be able to celebrate himself and his friends, and so I'm looking forward to that.
Nice. Wish. I'm sure everything will be fine. I have noted down in my diary. I'll send you a message for.
That would be nice. Thank you.
So, as we end the episode, Bari, is there any part of your life or career, or is there anything else you would like to share to the listeners before we wind down?
Mm, No, I guess I would just say, like, if anybody is interested in reading a confluence of tech and law analysis and bad reality shows analysis, you can follow me on Twitter. I do everything.
Ah,
So, but yeah, that's probably it. I can't think of anything else. I think I've shared all the things and gems that I could think of with you.
Thank you, Bari. I think that's absolutely special episode. Thank you. Wish you, your family, your loved ones, husband, everybody around you, all your touch points, your founding tech startups, everything, all the success, and everybody around you, good health. Stay healthy, stay happy, continue to inspire us, and thank you for everything you shared with us today.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Bari.